Welcome to I Wish You Could Hear This, where we explore great stories and simple proven steps to help you thrive in life, faith, and relationships.
In our research, we've heard hundreds of hope-filled strategies for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life that are grounded in science and consistent with biblical truth. And now you can hear them too.
I am Shaunti Feldhahn.
And I'm Jeff Feldhahn.
We today are in the middle of a mental health crisis, and today we are going to talk about something that any of us can do about it, any individual or any church. For 2 years, we've been interviewing pastors and leaders for the newest book, exploring how the church can do more than just refer people out to great counselors. Now, counselors are really vital, but the church can also step in and directly bring hope to people who are hurting. One of my very favorite interviews for the book was with Nate Graybill, who is the national director of the powerful Regeneration Recovery Program that was launched out of Watermark Church in Dallas and is now in churches around the country and I think even around the world. In this episode, we're going to dive into whether these quote-unquote recovery programs are something everyone should consider being a part of, and how they are really crucial tools that can transform the life of every church.
Nate, thanks so much for coming on our podcast.
Oh, it's a great privilege to be here. I'm so thankful for the work that you all are doing just to help the church along and really address some mental health issues that are out there, and then just love people, where they're at. So I'm just privileged to be invited and to meet you all, face to face, and and I've read your books and they've helped me. So,
oh, that's so sweet of you.
I'm grateful for the work that you've done in the past, and certainly an honor to be here with you.
You're so kind. All right, let me just read a little bit of a bio. I have your bio here. Nate and his wife Teresa have been married for 28 years. Woohoo! Live in Richardson, Texas, and have 4 children ages 26 to 18, along with a son-in-law and daughter-in-law. Nate roots
just
for all
this last year. I had 2 weddings last summer.
Wow.
So brand new.
Oh,
brand
that's
new.
Awesome. Well, we're going down that direction too. Yeah. We're going to have to get into that. Nate, okay, you're going to love this. Nate roots for all things Michigan.
Get out.
His motherland. He loves sports and smoked brisket. Okay, hold on. Don't respond yet.
I don't smoke it. I smoke it on my smoker.
Right.
Smoked brisket. He is the author, founder, and national director of Regeneration, a care, discipleship, and recovery ministry of Watermark Community Church in Dallas, Texas. Regeneration now has several hundred ministry locations across the U.S. and internationally. I was right. It's not just domestically.
Right. So she's not going to let me ask where you're from in Michigan. And
why not?
And watch you put up your hand, which
absolutely.
Anyone listening to this has no idea what Michigan
if I'm
people
doing
do.
it this way, does this looks like the Michigan hand?
There we
does.
go. Okay, so if you're watching on YouTube, you see
right
this.
here.
From Grand Rapids area?
That's exactly right. So Grand Rapids area is where my family's settled. I went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan.
Nice.
But in terms of
Rooting,
love of sports and just affiliation, I bleed maize and blue. So
okay, that everybody,
all those Spartans out there, but or Buckeyes.
And you just know we've lost everyone from Ohio, right?
I'm so
Ohio sorry.
People. I do love you. I mean, Jesus can cross all those barriers. Buckeyes need Jesus too.
They do, perhaps even more.
And here's the problem.
And us even more.
Can I just point out to you two Michigan boys that Michigan's gone up and down in the past, and so the trash talking it works now. It may not age so well.
We lost the Buckeyes for 10 years straight. So hey,
right.
And you guys won the last national title. So Buckeyes, hang in there, please.
Yes, exactly. All right.
So Shaunti's been talking about this, about how excited she is about having you on the podcast, Nate, and I got to tell you, I'm excited too, because when Shaunti starts going in our conversations, when she starts going deep into statistical analysis and regression stuff, she loses me. Of course, I'd never admit that to her, But now she's got a fellow data nerd here to communicate.
Yes, I need to explain that when I interviewed Nate and he started talking about the fact that they've done all these evaluations and they have all this data, and he started sending me spreadsheets, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have found my people, because this is the kind of
Yes.
thing that I love when churches do this.
I'll try not to be too much of a geek on a podcast. Has Shaunti done statistics on Michigan football for you? Like, that would be interesting,
That would
right?
be fascinating.
She has not, but that could be
That
another
would
project.
be fun. Absolutely.
There we go.
So Nate, could you share for our audience, a little bit of your story, how this kind of
Sure.
came about?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Michigan. I'm a son of a pastor, and his dad was a pastor. My uncle's a pastor.
Wow.
I find myself to be a pastor now. I did not want to be a pastor. So, I had a great family growing up and just grateful. But early on, I was exposed to some pornography by a neighbor. Literally, an older neighbor, came over and invited me to his house and then held me down and really showed me my first pornography
Wow.
magazine.
Wow.
And then later that neighbor would, say, "Hey, we're going to the park, and you need to go with us." And I'd say, "Well, I got to go home. It's time for me to go home." And he said, "Well, if you don't go home, I'm going to tell everybody the pastor's kid is looking at pornography." And so
Wow.
he kind of put that shame on me and would use that to manipulate me.
And how
And
old were
then
you at this point?
I think I was probably about 7 or 8.
Wow.
And I was actually younger than that. I was 6. I had prayed to receive Christ. I was a Christian at that time, but that was my first exposure. And then I was at another friend's house, and that friend actually introduced me to some sexual activity.
Wow.
And because of the pornography exposure and the shame that was there, and understanding that my dad's job and my family would be affected by, my actions, I never shared that with him and with my family. I think they would have handled it great at the time, but what it created for me at that time was kind of this secrecy, this double life that was going on. And we moved later on. But because of that double life that had kind of been ingrained, when I got older, I would start to escape and deal with stress and all those things into pornography. So through in junior high and high school years, I really developed an addiction to pornography that was secret in hiding. But on the outside, as a pastor's kid, I would perform and do well in school and sports and all those things, just trying to please people. Thankfully, the Lord gave me some reprieve for that through college. But when I moved down to Dallas, graduated from college and moved down here in Dallas, Texas, and I was isolated, that addiction really took off for me. And there was just a day where I had planned a weekend around viewing pornography and had said no to all my friends. And I realized, hey, this is a problem now. I'm starting to give up friendships and time, for an addiction that's here. And I got on my knees and I said, Lord, you're my savior, but I don't care what you do with me for the rest of my life, but I can't, this is bigger than me. I need you to help me. And I woke up the next day and I felt like my world had changed. And I really feel at that moment, Jesus went from being my savior to being my Lord and master. And he gave me really 3 years of complete freedom from temptation or any type of acting out. I met my wife during those years. We fell in love and grew close and really thought we were past that season. But about 2 years into our marriage, we were part of a church startup, Watermark Community Church, where I am now in Dallas, Texas. And my wife had our son was born, and she had quit work, and so we were going through some financial changes. I was leading a ministry at the church at that time. It was really small, and I accidentally stumbled across some pornography online. And I didn't tell anybody. The church was young. We were in a small group, and then I was back on that same site about 3 weeks later, then 2 weeks, and then a year later, I was back into my addiction. And so we're new. This church is new. We're a little bit isolated, somewhat in community, but I got stuck again, and I just woke my wife up one night and just said, "Hey, you need to understand this is what's been going on in my life." And she was hurt and disappointed and angry. And she said, I think we need to tell our pastor. And I said, I really don't want to tell our pastor. And she said, well, uh, I'm going to go stay with mom until you're ready to tell our pastor.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
And I said, well, I think I'd rather tell our pastor than your mother. and so and so that was a good decision. And so we went and met with our pastor. And Watermark was really had a vision to live life together authentically and want to do things in community. And our pastor did a great job meeting with us. We said, hey, are there other couples in this church that can relate to us that you can refer us to, or can you send us to a counselor? And he goes, well, he said, this is a big problem affecting marriages in the church. We just don't know who anyone is yet because nobody's talked about it. And at the time, there were maybe 500 people in the church. We'd grown over the course of 2 years. And he said, and maybe we need to go to counseling at some point. He said, but I want you to try a small group first and just be fully known there and see, share with them where you're at. Let's work through some scripture and come back. And if we need to bring in a professional at some point, we will, but let's just see what happens.
Wow.
So my wife and I joined this small group and really did
And the small
9
group
months.
was with the intention,
It was, it was just being
just a
n-
normal
Well,
small
being
group.
an-
It wasn't specific
so
to this addiction.
Yeah, it was a normal group of people that, now there were some other folks in there were struggling with some things, but they were, it was a place that we were just going to be authentic
Yeah.
with each other. And
about
that was
whatever
always
the issues were.
about whatever the issues. And Watermark really had that vision for its small groups anyway. At the beginning, Watermark by name is a sign of authenticity. So we had this idea of sharing life together and having the church be the place where people get well and we care for each other and bear one another's burdens, like Galatians, 6:1 tells us to do, and so 6:2, and that's always been, the church's vision. So this was the first time we were actually asked to practice it. Watermark, and so without really knowing what we were getting into, we just joined this group, and for the next 9 months, we kind of inventoried all my history and discovered, that really the times when I struggled the most were the times where I was most insecure about, being successful. When I had a fear of failure, when there were transitions and there was insecurity, or I was feeling rejected or alone, or like I wasn't affirmed in certain places, which was something that my family would get all the time where I was growing up. Um, but I would run, when I felt that way, I would run to a fantasy world where I'm always successful, always affirmed, and never fail. And that's why that addiction was my drug of choice, so to speak. And when I discovered that, I realized that this wasn't just about managing a lust problem or an addiction problem, that there was a real heart issue going on with me in terms of idolatry and where I was seeking life and value and affirmation. It really changed the way that I went about my own recovery. And so that was monumental for me. And that I just had a spot in my heart that wasn't fully surrendered to the Lord. I was looking for my meanings and significance apart from Christ in that relationship. And it changed my pursuit and really gave me a different level of freedom. So when we came back and we informed our pastor on where we were, and he said, "Oh, that's great. Who are you going to tell?" I said, "Well, I told you. Why don't you tell anybody else?" And he said, "Well, you don't, but there's other folks that are struggling." And so, my wife and I just started to share our story, with others, and we started to meet with couples. And then, Watermark was looking for a kind of a, a group-based ministry that they could put in place to do pastoral care for all issues, there where members could care for each other individually, that had some curriculum and movement through it. And so because we were already doing part of that ministry, I was asked to be part of the team to help launch that ministry. And so in January of 2002, we launched a ministry here, a care ministry that really worked through 12 steps, and I really had, and because it was the only thing that was out there that kind of fit what we were doing. And Watermark used a lot of that for its primary pastoral care. And I was pretty suspicious of 12 steps, at the beginning, because that feels a little bit like voodoo to me out there. My recovery had happened in a small group. But a couple things happened for me in the first couple of years when that ministry launched was, one, there was an authentic environment that I had not experienced other places. So everybody that walked through the door was stuck in one part of their life. There's something they couldn't get past. There was a pain point for them, and it might have been chemical addiction or a hurt or a relationship problem or some type of temptation that they couldn't get over, maybe anxiety, but they were stuck and they couldn't get past it. And so that gave us the opportunity. So they were willing to work because they really were stuck. They were willing to do some
Yeah.
hard work. They say,
If they came in the door, it's like, okay, I want to do something about this.
just
Yeah.
tell me what to do. I need help. I've been going to counselors. I'm stuck, or I haven't been going to counselors. I'm stuck. And then the other part, it was a really authentic environment out of the gate. So people were willing to talk about their struggles with each other in a small group of other people struggling.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Was this gender specific? Was it just men meeting with other men, or was it co-ed?
So we would have a time, we would have a time where we were all mixed gender, where we would, share a story and a teaching, but then we'd break up into small groups that were gender specific.
Okay.
So people feel free to share without hindrances. They're not creating stumbling blocks for others. There's not, deeper connections that aren't appropriate with people that aren't healthy. But they weren't issue specific.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you
Okay.
weren't. Okay.
And this
Yeah.
is where I'd love to dive in a little bit into what I found so compelling when I was talking not just to Nate, but in all of these interviews for the book, which is, When Hurting People Come to Church. And it's specifically, that book is specifically more for leaders and involved church volunteers and, people who care about the church stepping in to be the church and trying to provide some guidance for what might that look like to involve lay people in that process, not just referring out to counselors. Like, what might it look like to build something in the church? I was so struck by every single interview that I did with churches who were really already far down the road of doing that in their life of their church, just how many of them sort of built that process around a recovery program. And you think of recovery programs as being, well, this is drugs and alcohol, right? Like the 12-step, right? And these churches were, most of them actually, had broadened the recovery groups so that it you might not even call it recovery. Like, it was like a lot of them said, hurts, habits, and hangups, any issue. And if it was that you're having an issue in your relationship, if you're having anxiety and depression problems, if you do have an addiction, if you had trauma in your past and you need a place to be authentic and come around other people who can help support you. And it seems to me that this process, if a church wants to get started in this kind of, hey, maybe it's not just about referring to counselors. Counselors are great, but since so many of them are full and, often there's a cost that people can't afford, getting started, it seems like these recovery group models are one really powerful starting point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really was for me. So that was an aha for me, is like, I'm in this environment where there's authentic sharing. People are working through multiple issues and they come in broken. And my aha was, where else does this happen in the church? It doesn't happen on Sunday morning where people are authentic and willing to share and to come into groups. It doesn't happen in discipleship ministries naturally, even equipping ministries within churches. People come to all those things for different reasons, even small groups or affinity groups or life groups. But in this environment, everybody was coming in broken and willing to talk. And then when you put them in a mixed group, what it did, for me anyway, when I come in, I'm hurting, I want you to pinpoint and fix that one issue. And I don't trust anybody that doesn't share my issue. I don't feel like you relate to me. I feel unique, like I'm broken in a special way. But the beauty of the mixed issue group for me was, that guy in my group goes to alcohol for the same reason that I go to
Right.
pornography. And that guy works 100 hours a week for the same reason that I go to pornography. and it helps me get to that deeper root of what's going on in terms of that idolatry that I talked about earlier.
That is so powerful.
Yep. And then the other thing it does is I realize my issue is much bigger than one issue. Like health is spiritual health and emotional health, really needs to encompass my marriage and my finances and all these other things. And I maybe have more issues that are lower, that are beneath the surface, that that are beyond just managing. For me, it was pornography, but for someone else, it might be something else, something different. So what a mixed issue group does was make me understand that I'm not unique. And then these principles were working regardless of what the struggle was. It wasn't just for chemical addiction or pornography. It was working for people coming in with anxiety, or a hurt they couldn't get over. And so the other big aha for me was that the 12 steps really outline the biblical process for healing and growth and flourishing and sanctification in the Christian life. And I had to do some research on where that originated. And so,
and if I understand correctly, I actually interviewed one of the people that was involved in some ways early on in the 12-step process. And he was talking about how, I believe it's in Akron, Ohio,
yes,
that if you go to a particular, they've kind of memorialized it. Like if you go to this particular place, I think it's on a campus in Akron, Ohio. They've got.
I don't know. We Michigan people. We don't.
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
go down to
yes.
Akron.
I was just gonna say, okay, that they've actually got the podium and the Bible. That the folks who created the 12-step program
Through
that
Alcoholics Anonymous.
through Alcoholics Anonymous, and then expanding it, and they've got the program and the Bible and like the biblical principles, that the whole thing originally was founded specifically as, what does the Bible say that we can create into 12 steps? And a lot of people don't know that it actually started biblically. This was not something that was a secular program that that we tacked on the Christian elements. It was actually started and from the ground up was built as a biblically minded process.
Yeah, it was initially developed, quite honestly, to be a spiritual growth and dealing with struggle issues, and later it became focused specifically on the alcoholic part because it was helping so many people. And they took some of those Christian elements out of it to make it available to everybody. But the roots of those 12 steps are all biblical foundations for the growth of Christian life. It's really
I just love that.
solidifying your relationship with God, identifying your sin nature and the sin that's in your life and how it's affecting relationships, working on relationship reconciliation, and then identity and how you carry out the gifts and intimacy with God long term in the Great Commission. That's really the frame and structure that's underneath all of that. And so
that's why it works so well in so many churches.
That's why it works.
I get, as you've kind of unpacked this for me, Nate, I get the from the position of the person who needs the help. I get that there's, I have an expectation that there's going to be sharing here. So there's going to be transparency, authenticity, all of that. I get that. And that's amazing. Who oversees that? How does the process work? Is there just one person who is skilled and trained as a professional who leads the small group or the group that's meeting? Or is it a normal person like you or me or Shaunti?
Who's maybe walked through it themselves.
Yeah. So for us, it is actually about 90% of our small group leaders have been participants themselves as they come through.
Wow.
When we launch a ministry, we'll invite a church to do a church has to do a pilot group. They don't have to be people that had addictions. We've opened it up now to the whole church, not just for people that have struggles, but even people that just want to grow spiritually, with regeneration. But most of our leaders have experienced it themselves, and they lead and they set the tone for authenticity in their own life. So we're not asking them to be somebody's savior or mentor or professional counselor. We're just asking them to speak out of their own experience. And the beautiful thing about the steps is that each time you go through them, God just tends to peel back another layer. So the leaders aren't done growing. They're just going on the next level of depth in their relationship with God in front of the group that they're with. And
Oh, that's so good.
and so they're continuing to grow as well, you know. And so, and here's one more piece of this mixed issue group. So I don't know if there's any pastors that listen to this, but when you're in a mixed issue group and you come in as a participant, at first you think nobody relates to me that's different than my struggle. But it doesn't take long for you to realize that these principles work across all kinds of struggles. And then you go through a full group and you're in this kind of, I know it's almost like a battle troop working together and supporting each other as you're going through all your struggles. And you see that it works across all these different struggles. And then you come in and you facilitate with a co-leader. We always put two people together so they're not alone, so that they co-lead and they move through this together. By the end of 2 years, you now have a lay leader that can counsel biblically on a number of issues beyond their own struggle. So it actually works to equip, people within the church to navigate biblical principles beyond their own struggles, even in the struggles that move into other areas. And so you're equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry. So the structure provides that.
I am laughing because I remember a story you told me when we were doing the research interview. This is why this podcast is named I Wish You Could Hear This, because it's all this stuff that's like, man, that's so interesting. I wish other people could hear this. Tell the story of the pastor that was so concerned about somebody who came in with meth addiction into his church. And he's like, I have no idea how to handle this. What do we do?
Yeah, we had a local pastor, that not at Watermark, but it was another church in the area, a fairly well-known church. A guy in his congregation was struggling with a meth addiction, walked into the church, and the pastor goes, I've got nothing for you. I don't know how to help. So Watermark runs this ministry. Go down there and get well. And the guy came through and did well. But when I came back and he came to our group, I literally just asked our leaders, hey, who in the room, and I mean, we had probably 80 leaders, at the time, who in the room, and these are lay leaders, these are laymen.
These are not, and this
these
is
are not
like
professionally trained people.
This is what everyone defaults to today is like, oh my gosh, meth addiction, we got to get them to a specific rehab, licensed therapists, etc. So I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah. And so I asked our leaders, who thinks that they could handle this in their group? And the whole room raised their hand.
The whole room.
All these lay leaders.
All these lay leaders, they know how to counsel biblically on this. Now, that doesn't mean that this person may not need to spend season in an inpatient treatment center. They might need some professional counseling in addition to what we provide. But I've got a whole lay leadership team in the church that goes, oh yeah, bring them into my group. We'll take it.
So as I'm hearing that among the lay leadership, I'm thinking, my goodness, all of us, as we grow and follow Christ, we want to be used by him, but somehow in my mind I'd put in my head that to be used, I need to evangelize, and I'm just not the kind of guy who can go hand out tracts at the mall or on the beach, and it always felt as part of my life, my Christian walk, that was somewhat deficient. And if you're telling me now that through my brokenness, that's really all I need to bring, and a listening ear, and I could fulfill part of the calling that Jesus has made on my life, and people are coming to me.
Yes. Well, I mean, God wired us to be fully known and fully loved. I mean, he really wired us to be fully, and so part of you understanding that you are fully loved is making yourself fully known. So as you go through this process and you make yourself fully known to others and realize that you can be in an environment with other Christians that love you in the middle of your brokenness, that don't reject you, and you experience that healing yourself, and then you become willing to share your own broken story with others, that's actually what gives you a doorway, not just to people coming into that ministry, but to people in your family, to people in your work environment, your neighbors. Brokenness is the pain is the common language of mankind. And so when you can speak out of your own brokenness, you become a safe person to someone else. And when you can provide hope with just making yourself fully known and sharing your story with others and say that, hey, here's where I was and here's what God's done in my life. They may not believe Christ at all, but they want that freedom, and it gives you a doorway to share, the work God's done in your life with others.
One of the things there's a couple of things here that just so strike me. One of them is that just how perfectly what we're called to in order to walk alongside others in these moments, and whether or not we're trained in any particular way, just being authentic, how much that complements when there is a need for more specialized care, when there is a need for somebody who, like the meth addict, they may need to have an inpatient treatment program. They may need to go get specialized skills and deal with things with a therapist, but the therapist isn't allowed to walk alongside. Right? The therapist isn't allowed to sit in a small group with them and share their own story and their own hurts. I mean, that's literally against the principles of licensure in every state in the United States.
Yeah.
They'd lose their license if they started building a friendship and being authentic and sharing and going to dinner at the client's house. But you need both in so many of these cases. And so it's just so precious to see examples of this that are working and thriving and where people are getting healed. And okay, so the second thing that I just want to move in on, back to the data nerd thing. So one of the things that I was so struck when I was speaking to you, because like I said, I spoke to many people who had created recovery programs or had done Celebrate Recovery in their church or had, a different kind of a program, but they all said the same thing, which is that these programs naturally are discipleship programs. They're naturally building discipleship and evangelism and outreach and the church being the church and learning how to follow Jesus better. And one of the things you told me is that you had actually started with a different recovery program. And you said, I want this to be more discipleship oriented. So you redid it, and that's how Regeneration came about. And then you started looking at the numbers, and you started looking at how effective it was for discipleship. And I'd love you to talk about what you found.
Yeah, I mean, so my background actually is in economics. I have an economics degree. And then I spent 12 years in strategic planning and business development before I joined the church staff. So a lot of our decisions back then were data driven. I had this environment that I felt was hidden from the church, and I had a captive audience. I had people that were broken, ready to work, and I had biblical principles that were available that I felt would work for anyone in terms of discipleship. So the whole purpose of Regeneration was to take a moment when people were ready and willing to work authentically, and then to open the door wider to the church. So that was the whole goal of us creating Regeneration, to make it something available to everybody. And so when we did that, it really grew and expanded in amazing ways. But in terms of just the spiritual formation that's happening, I also want to be able to show that empirically, because people don't believe me. When I tell them, hey, come to Regeneration, they go, oh, that's 12 steps. That's for those people. Our biggest hurdle is helping even senior pastors and leaders and church professionals, and sometimes licensed counselors, and always parishioners understand that, hey, this is something for everyone. So we've now integrated surveys within the curriculum that actually track how people are growing, so we can share that. And so we're getting some information back on that right now. I mean, right now, just so you know, with Regeneration, not all ministries are like this, but Regeneration, our number 2 presenting issue why people come is just to be discipled and grow through, because they don't really have problems. We don't really have problems when we show up.
We don't have an
I'm
issue.
just going to grow.
Yeah.
Number
Yeah.
1 is usually some sexual struggle. Number 2 is they're coming to be discipled. Then you have anxiety, fear, codependency, people pleasing, chemical addiction is in the top 10 too. But we've got this broad mix. But something that's really been interesting to me, Regen started as a church-based ministry. So almost everybody coming in right out of the gate claims to be a Christian. 92% claim to be a Christian when they start the steps. But even in that, when we start to measure, hey, how do you feel about yourself when you start? 62% of those Christians, about how they feel about who they are as a person, they feel negative or unsure about where they're at when they start.
Wow.
And 38% aren't sure of God's plan for their life. Remember, these are people that are stuck and they're in pain or there's something going on, so they're just not in a great spot. When they describe their relationships, almost 45% of those people coming in feel like they're unknown and alone within the church.
Wow.
And only maybe about 20% would say what we would call biblical community, where we're talking about God stuff and growing and encourage each other to grow. So 80% say they aren't experiencing biblical community within a church, this authentic community. And then this was a heartbreaker when we started looking at numbers. When people come in, these are, again, 92% claim to be believers on the front side. When we said describe your purpose in life, 54% fall into a category of meaningless, destructive, or self-focused purpose.
Wow.
Or they're focused on others, my kids, others. Only 16% have a God-focused purpose in their life when they come in.
Wow.
Wow.
So-
well, and it's very easy just in the busyness of life to become wrapped up in other things like the kids and work and whatever.
So pushing on the data point there, 16% at the front end.
16% say my purpose is God's purpose for my life.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have follow-up numbers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since we only have a couple minutes here,
Okay,
what's
so
the,
I'll work
what's
back.
the bottom line?
By the time they make it through, the people convince you. We'll start with describe your purpose in life. 75% go from 16 to 75%. Wow. God's purpose for my life. My identity is now in Christ, and I'm going to live for His purpose in my life.
Wow.
And only 2% end with I'm still meaningless, self-destructive. So we go from 54% down to 2. Massive
Wow.
change. Massive change. When they describe their relationships, we move from 45% alone or unknown down to 5%, 63% in biblical community, and 33% in close supportive community. So we moved to
Wow.
almost 96% saying, I've experienced this authentic community and I'm living in it. How do people feel about themselves? I said, 62% were unsure or negative at the beginning. That goes to 91% positive or excited by the time that they're done. God's plan for my life, there was 34% that were unsure or negative about that. It moves to 91% positive or excited about that. So you see these massive changes.
I
And these are
love this.
people coming through just with discipleship, and they're reporting growth, and then let's get to the important thing, because people want to know, hey, in terms of my own struggle, I come in with this problem, what's the result of that? We, in terms of their struggle, 99% experienced some freedom from that issue that came over. 3 out of 4 experienced significant freedom and then growth in other areas of their life, because we're uncovering everything. So we're seeing just some massive movement from Christians, of which the highest percent show up to, I'm just here to be discipled. Yeah. So this is something for everybody. And our pilot groups include pastors and elders, when they come through, and they're included in these data as well. So, we're just grateful.
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
So,
We only have a couple minutes.
I know we do. So as a gateway point for people in the wider community coming into the church who may not have a faith background perspective. Do you have any kind of numbers on that?
We're getting there. So, like, we are in the first year of collecting. We've now broadened the ministry out to other types of groups in the community and doing some affinity groups now. So they're all included in that data. We don't have enough data to parse out all of those and track them all the way through. So we're looking at groups. By the end of this year, I will be able to tell you, hey, here's what people coming in with chemical addictions that are not believers. Here's the change that they see. Now,
This is what I'm excited about.
I will say to this. I said 8%, on the front side claim not to be believers when they walk in the door. At the end, we have 11% that have claimed that they've received Christ.
Wow.
So that's
awesome.
telling you've got people coming in that say they are believers and Christians, but they find out they're not. They have not really made that conversion.
That's so cool.
So we're starting to see groups, come through. So the geek in me says, give the data more time. I really want to share it broader with you, but we're super excited about it branching out and excited for what God's doing with it.
All right. So just to, as we wind up here, if people who are listening to this want to explore bringing regeneration to their church, and I need to say out loud, there are plenty of wonderful programs out there, but I was really struck by regeneration, which is why I wanted you to come on and talk about it. So if they want to explore that program specifically, bringing it to their church, what should they do? Who do they contact?
So if you're bringing it to your church, you can go to watermarkresources.com and just click on the regeneration ministry there, and there's forms to fill out, and we'll talk with you. You can also check out kind of our public-facing website for people interested in just attending, and that will lead you there as well. That's regenerationrecovery.org. And here's what I'll say, even for non-believers. If there's non-believers listening to the podcast, the door is wide open. Nobody's going to ask you to move through something you're not ready to. We meet everybody in their brokenness. You can take as long as you want just to figure out if it's right for you. So you can come in to any ministry. Regenerationrecovery.org lists where all the available websites are, all the available locations are. And there's even some virtual groups online that you can attend, as you come through. But if you're an organization or a counselor or a nonprofit that's looking to start the ministry, watermarkresources.com is your website. And we provide coaching to work with your point leaders to develop the ministry, with your organization to fit your needs.
I guess in closing, one of the things, Nate, that we always want to do with every episode is to leave our listeners with kind of one big takeaway. And when you look at what God has done with this program, with your life, what's the lesson or practical point that you think God would want our listeners, people, to hear?
I was invited to be known by my church, to known and loved. And so God, when he invites you to be fully known and fully loved, even in the midst of your struggle, it's an invitation to something that you can't dream of. And that's really all that's happened. I just feel like I've been accepting invitations. So first I became fully known and fully loved within a community, which allowed me to let myself be fully known and fully loved within my marriage and with other places. And as we started to share our stories, God involved us with other stories. He's changed my career and lets me be in a ministry where there's massive life change happening, and then he lets me be part of working with pastors in other places. So providing environments where people understand that they're fully known and already fully known and fully loved by a holy God, but two, they can experience that within Christian community and then navigate that together. I just want to tell people, accept the invitation that's in front of you. If God's calling you to attend regeneration because you're stuck or struggling, go do that. If you're a pastor that wants to create invitations, we've got tools and resources to help you generate that within your organization, but your church needs to be that place. It needs to be an environment where people feel like it's safe to be fully known and fully loved, and you're going to work through stuff together. And you need to provide avenues for that to happen. And what you get on the backside is something that you can't imagine.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Nate.
Wow.
Thanks for coming on the show. I'm just going to encourage everybody to check out Regeneration, and you can see the details in the show notes. please share today's episode with those who need it, because I think a lot of us need it. And make sure you tag Regeneration on your social media channels.
And in closing, go blue.
Go blue. Hail to the victors.
There you go.
All right.
Hey, God bless you
Thanks
for all the
being
work
with
you're
us,
doing. God bless
Thanks
you.
so
For all the
much.
Great.
Thanks for listening to I Wish You Could Hear This. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, forward today's audio or video link to a friend, counselor, or pastor who would be encouraged.